Hi there. John Wesley Bready, This Freedom, Whence? In the chapter Politics, Penal Code and Prisons. In the last segment, Bready dealt with public hangings in the middle of the 18th century, and there's more. Moralt, too, a Swiss traveler in England in the third decade of the century, has left an illuminating impression. Quote, "The criminals pass through the streets in carts," he says, "dressed in their best clothes, and with white gloves and nosegays, if it be the season. Those that die merrily, or that don't at least show any great fear of death, are said to die like gentlemen, and to merit this encomium, most of them die like beasts, without any concern, or like fools, having no other view than to divert the crowd." End of quote. Such, too, was the general levity of these occasions that Moralt confesses, quote, "A man cannot well forbear laughing to see these rogues set themselves off as heroes by an affectation of despising death." End of quote. Henry Fielding, the writer, of course, of the famous Tom Jones, who in 1749 became Chief Magistrate of Westminster, speaks of these wretches as being, quote, "attended with the compassion of the meek and tender-hearted, and with the applause, admiration, and envy of all the bold and hardened." He also says of the hanging spectacles, quote, "We sacrifice the lives of men not for their reformation, but for the diversion of the populace." End of quote. Yet Dr. Johnson, who on the whole was more compassionate toward criminals than Fielding, was thoroughly upset when finally, in 1783, public executions were suppressed. His great biographer Boswell records the doctor's wrath, quote, "The age is running mad after innovations. Tyburn," that was the place where the public hangings were most notorious, "Tyburn itself is not safe from innovation. Sir, executions are intended to draw spectators. If they don't draw spectators, they don't answer their purpose." The old method was satisfactory to all parties. The public was gratified by a procession. The criminal was supported by it. Why is all this swept away? End of the Johnson quote. The hanging shows, however, were but symbolic of the spirit behind the penal code. After the rebellion of 1745, Temple Bar, London, was long decorated with a row of heads, betokening the fate of the Pretenders' captured leaders. And Horace Walpole points out that a flourishing business was there being conducted in renting spyglasses at a halfpenny a look. Till the fifth decade of the century, persons found guilty of high treason were cut down from the gallows when only half hanged, disemboweled, and their entrails burned before the howling mob. Till the middle of the century, too, women, for different crimes, including arson and husband murder, were, after semi-strangulation, publicly burned. And not until 1771 was the law repealed condemning certain prisoners to be, quote, "pressed to death," end of quote, under iron weights. Though not for 3 decades preceding had this barbarous law been enforced. But well into the second half of the century, and even after its close, some brutalizing legal punishments lingered on. The pillory long remained an established institution wherein unpopular victims sometimes perished from mob assaults. Branding on the hand continued. Whipping at the tail of a cart was still a familiar sight in many communities, while the transportation of both sexes and the flogging of women survived the century. The officials, too, who enforced the law were often as callous as the law itself. Fielding's Justice Thrasher in his novel Amelia, and his Justice Frolic in Joseph Andrews, are sketched from life. Many of the justices, Smollett pronounced, men of profligate lives, needy, mean, ignorant, and rapacious, who often acted from the most scandalous principles of selfish avarice. In rural areas, most justices of the peace were squires, though about a fifth were parsons, and their powers approached that of petty sultans. The pillory, the stocks, the scold's bridle, the whipping post, the branding iron, transportation, and atrocious jails were among the means whereby they demonstrated the virtues of the happy constitution in the land of the free. In urban centres, the enormities of trading justices and pettifogging lawyers marked such as social pests. Johnson, in his poem London, attacks the fell attorney who prowls for prey, and certainly the justice shops of the trading justices, by exploiting the shortcomings of a then highly litigious people, beguiled many to their undoing. Fielding represents these contemptible judges as interested always in the sight of a case from which they could extort most personal gain. Nor was this mercenary taint confined to the lower officials of the law. During a considerable part of the century, the higher judges expected and got large sums of money as New Year's presents from the bar practicing under them, while the gratuities of the Lord Chancellor at this season long ran into thousands of pounds. Next time, Bready deals with the barbarous prison system.